Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Senate Ways and Means Committee. I'm Senator Bob Guida from District 2. Today, we're holding a meeting of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we're holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we're providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff do have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in the meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We've provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remote senate, that's one word, remote senate @leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is not able to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I'll call the roll. Senator D'Alessandro.
Senator D'Alessandro, I'm at home in Manchester, in my home, and my wife is in the house.
Senator Daniels.
Senator Gary Daniels, I'm at my State House office and my assistant is in the adjoining room.
Senator Hennessy.
Good morning, Erin Hennessy from Littleton. I am in my office alone.
Senator Rosenwald.
Good morning, Cindy Rosenwald. I am in my home in Nashua alone.
And I'm Senator Bob Guida from District 2 at my home in Warren. No one else in the room, my grandson upstairs with the dog. With that, Senator Daniels, are you able to put up the picture of the flag? And if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. With that, we can begin our schedule, and I believe Senate Bill 15, no, my mistake. Hang on, let me get to the schedule here. Yeah, that would make House Bill 15, FN. And we'll be looking for the prime sponsor to testify on that bill. Ava?
All right, Mr. Chair, we have Speaker Representative Packard. You should be all set, Representative.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you this morning?
If I was any better, I'd be twins.
Well, for the record, I am Representative Packard, Rockingham 5, and I'm here to introduce House Bill 15. Take a minute and just let you know, this is the third session we've had this. The first session, Ways and Means, which we all agreed to, delayed it because of the Wayfair decision. And then last session, it actually passed out of the House by unanimous vote out of Ways and Means, and I think it was on the consent calendar. And then it got hung up in House Bill 1264, which was vetoed and not overridden. So this is my third try. This bill here was combined in the House with Airbnb. My original bill just covered the car rental part of it, and Ways and Means in the House put it together. So I'm not 100% complete. I think Chairman Major is on the phone on any questions on the Airbnb side. But basically on the car part, what this bill does is, a number of years ago, I think, a few of us were around then, we decided to apply the rooms and meals tax to a car rental. And this company's, and there's a couple of them out there, Turo is the one that was the main one, I think, and then there's some other ones coming up, got into the car rental business. They have a different platform than the standard Hearst, Avis, Enterprise, where they have brick and mortar stores and they own their own cars. It is a different model where they facilitate people renting their cars through them. Now, our belief is that all they do is rent cars. I want to make that perfectly clear. And we've had this discussion numerous times. So what we're saying is that all we want to do is that if they're going to rent cars in the state of New Hampshire, then they be the same rules applied to them as to the brick and mortar stores. And I said that if you wanted to get rid of the rooms and meals tax and car rentals, this would be a moot point. But as long as we have the rooms and meals tax and car rentals, it should be applied fairly across the board. This is completely a matter, to me, of fairness. And you're going to hear from some people that this is a new tax. It is not a new tax. It is not even near being a new tax. All it is applying it to a different form of car rental. Now, these companies rent cars. They do nothing else. They don't have any other business at this point. They rent cars. Is it a small piece right now? Yes. But when Uber came out, it was a small piece, and now look where they are. So this could have, I'm not saying significant impact, but it could have an impact. And I think that if we're going to charge the car rental companies that have brick and mortar stores the rooms and meals tax that any other entity renting cars in the state of New Hampshire should be charged the same thing. And that's what this bill does. It does not create a new tax. It does not create a new different type of tax on any kind of industry. It just, all it does is it brings equity to the fact that we charge in the brick and mortars. This company also rents cars in New Hampshire. And they say, well, we're a ride sharing company. Well, I think it was the first session that I brought this bill in, we had somebody rent a car from Turo, and it was $90 for a day. So I'm not sure how that comes into ride sharing. They have the same thing. They have insurance policies. They have everything that the standard car rental companies have. And all this does is say, if you're going to rent cars in New Hampshire, you pay the same thing that the other people do. That's what the bill does. I'm not going to speak on the Airbnb thing. Last session, DRA did a tremendous amount of work on how this would work. And I'm sure that either they, and I'm sure they're on the line today, or Chairman Major could fill you in on all the details of that. And I'll be glad to try and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any questions for the speaker? If not, I do have one. Mr. Speaker, is there any way that we can quantify whether or not, and if so, how much of revenues that should be paid to the state are being missed at this time? Or perhaps, maybe that's a better question for DRA.
I think, Mr. Chairman, we did try and calculate that a while back. I think under the first session, when we talked about that. And at the time, it was $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. But again, this is an industry that is going to go. And I want to make it perfectly clear. We are in no way trying to discourage this type of industry. I mean, it's the new way things are being done. So we're not trying to discourage it. All we're saying is, if you're going to rent cars, you pay the same tax. If you want to get rid of the tax on car rentals, that wouldn't bother me a bit. But it is going to grow, and it's it's not something that's going to make us millions of dollars in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't think, but it is a matter of fairness. When somebody goes into Hertz or Enterprise, they've got to pay the 9%. They're renting this car online. They don't pay the 9%, but they're still renting a car in the state of New Hampshire. To me, it all comes down to a matter of complete fairness. If we're going to do it for one, we should do it for all and apply the law equally to all people.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next we have Representative Major.
Right, I'm gonna make a couple of remarks here before we start into testifying, other than the sponsor. That is, we have, I believe, 12 people to speak. I'd like to limit testimony to 2 minutes apiece. I would ask those who have remarks that are similar to those that have already been made to refrain from speaking if that's the case. And with that, we'll start with Representative Major, Chairman of House Ways and Means. No time limit for you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Guider. I'm Representative Non-Major from Rockingham 14. I chair the Ways and Means Committee. House Bill 15, we spent a lot of time discussing House Bill 15. And to reiterate, House Bill 15 levels the playing field between online and retail facilitators for both car and room rentals. The room and meals tax should be applied equally to all businesses, regardless of if their business model is in person or is online. This bill is not a new tax. Ways and Means amended this bill to ensure that did not apply to travel service agents' fees. I want to remind you, this tax is applied to short-term rentals, and short-term rental is anything less than 185 continuous days. So if you rent for 30 days, 1 day, or 180 days, you will pay the short-term rental tax. We went over and over. This is not a new tax. And I have nothing new to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative. Have a good day.
Thank you.
And next,
Next, we have Representative Almy.
all right, Representative, welcome, and
Thank you.
please speak.
Thank you. Representative Susan Almy, past chair of Ways and Means, Lebanon, Grafton 13. We didn't realize last year while we were working on this that you were being extensively lobbied by Turo. I sent all of you an email last night with the Turo website screenshots on it from yesterday. And that makes it very clear that Turo is not an electronic billboard. It provides insurance for both driver and car owner. It provides 24/7 roadside assistance and customer support. It dictates the cleanliness of the car. and various other aspects of the car owner's responsibility. It deals with complaints, and it provides for easy cancellation. It advertises like this on the web: car rentals near you, Turo, with the website. Find, book, and unlock cars instantly. In the attached screenshots, it uses comments comparing it with Airbnb. The Airbnb part of this bill was quite uncontroversial when we added it to the car part, because they're both dealing with exactly the same sections of the rooms and meals tax. Both of them, as the chair said, are on just modernizing the language that we need to apply the tax for the same function that it is always applied to, which is renting rooms and renting cars. Now that a lot of our commerce is online. When we don't do that, then we are under a constitutional threat, because we are treating the same businesses differently. And we are putting a tax burden on the retail New Hampshire-based businesses, which is not on the national online businesses. Now, DRA 3 years ago signed an agreement with Airbnb. Airbnb has been collecting and remitting the rooms tax ever since. But Airbnb has something like 500 different small competitors that we don't have the bandwidth to go after all of, who insisted that on the definition that we had of a facilitator in our statutes, which was many years old, did not include the online version. So what this bill does for both of them is to define facilitator in the modern age. If you are collecting money in order to create a room rental or a car rental, and you do not collect and remit it, under our law, the person you are collecting it from, the car owner or the hotel or the inn or the second home that someone is trying to sell, to rent out to help pay their property tax, that person is liable for that money. If that person is caught by DRA, as one was in my town, he was renting his back room on a real bulletin board at Dartmouth Hitchcock Hospital to visiting nurses. And somehow they found him and they told him, you have to pay the back taxes on this. He was really mad. He called me up. He yelled at me. I had to tell him that legally you have to pay this. That is not good for the people who are getting caught. If a facilitator isn't collecting and you don't realize that you have to pay the tax, it is very much not good for that person who's being caught if we don't have this change in our law to make it the way it is in the current example, which is that the person who, the real estate agent in a lake community who is renting, serving as agent for a lot of second homes in his area, does collect and remit. If he didn't, then they would be going after the homeowner. In the case of car rentals, if Avis didn't collect and remit, they would have to be going after Avis. But now that we have this car sharing arrangement, which does all of the functions of car rental, except that it is using the cars of individuals, legally, the state has to go after that individual, and that is renting his car out. And we really need to get this corrected. So I hope that you will look at those screenshots and that you will decide to pass both pieces of this bill this time. Last time, by the way, you took out the on Airbnb part. We call it Airbnb because it's the easiest way to name it, but it's for all of those small ones that Airbnb can't control. You took out the Airbnb part by mistake and left in the car rental part, which we understood was the one that you didn't like. So I am hoping that this time you'll just pass the whole thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Representative Almy, do you know how much we bring in revenue from car rentals?
Car rentals is a very small part of the rooms and meals tax. It's about 10% of the tax. I think it may be less than that now. It's usually been around $8 to $9 million. We did, Turo, when we started, said that they had absolutely nobody in New Hampshire, but that they were going to grow, and they did grow. And I think last year they were up to 400 people renting their cars, something like that. That is the owners.
Okay, yeah, I was talking specifically about the organized ones like Budget, Avis.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Those get us less than they would have before, because a number of the car rental agencies immediately that we put it into the rooms and meals tax moved across the border from the airports. Thanks.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And at this point, I'm going to ask further speakers to be limited to 2 minutes. Ava, who's next?
Mr. Chair, next we have Carolyn Lear from the DRA.
All right, you don't have 2 minutes. Probably can explain a lot here, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'll do my best. Good morning, Carolyn Lear, Assistant Commissioner with the Department of Revenue. As is usually the case, the department doesn't take a position on HB 15. However, HB 15 does address a longstanding M&R tax situation that the DRA has been very involved with. So I was hoping to provide you some history on that, as well as to give you an understanding of how HB 15 would impact tax administration for us. So in order to understand HB 15, it's helpful to understand the New Hampshire Supreme Court case in New Hampshire v. Priceline. As the representatives prior to me very adeptly explained, the M&R tax has always taxed room sharing and car sharing transactions. Those transactions are taxable today. Under the statute, these transactions clearly constitute taxable transactions. But the Priceline case, which was decided now a couple of years ago, held that the department could not require that online platforms become licensed and collect and remit the M&R tax for the transactions that they facilitate. So therefore, as the law exists today, each individual homeowner who rents their property using an online platform must become a registered operator with the Department of Revenue and must collect and remit the tax on those transactions. From our perspective, House Bill 15 doesn't change the taxability of these transactions. It simply provides that the platform and not the individual homeowner is the party responsible for collecting and remitting the M&R tax. As far as tax administration, what that would mean for the department is that we would license each platform as the operator instead of the thousands of homeowners who currently must become licensed. each month we would receive a monthly return from each platform rather than the thousands of homeowners that use those platforms. And lastly, when the department initiates compliance activities, such as audits and collections, those audits and collections would be against the platform instead of the homeowners that utilized those platforms. As you can imagine, our expectation is that that would reduce the number of audits, returns, and licenses that the department issues for these sharing transactions. As far as the more mundane tax administration sort of stuff, the department's ready, willing, and able to administer HB 15. We wouldn't require any additional appropriations to administer HB 15, but we would note that HB 15 currently takes effect 60 days after passage. And we would suggest two what I would call improvements to that effective date. For taxpayer record keeping convenience, I think it would be best if it took effect on the first day of a month, which would coincide with the taxable period for the M&R tax. And we certainly want to make sure that taxpayers have enough time to prepare for this change should you pass HB 15. The platforms, for example, may need to update their website and user agreements with clients, for example. So we would suggest that 60 days may be a bit fast for the taxpayers that this would impact. Currently in the budget, some other changes to the M&R tax take effect October 1st. So we might suggest that an October 1st, 2021 effective date might work a little better for constituents. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from the members of the committee? Hearing none, again, I'll ask my question that I asked to the speaker. Do you have any sense of an estimation of the value of this, or that of revenues that might be lost at present or that may in the future accrue by passing this legislation?
Yeah, great question. We really don't. For a large portion of the tax base for these transactions, the individual homeowners are complying currently. So it wouldn't result in an increase in revenue. It would just result in a different taxpayer being responsible for remitting the tax. But there certainly is sort of an unknown group of non-compliant taxpayers who don't remit on their own currently, who would likely be forced to do so by way of using these platforms. But it's unknowable.
All right. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, seeing none. Thank you very much, Carolyn.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next we have John Olson.
Mr. Olson, welcome. And if you would, please try to limit your testimony to 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we sure can.
All right, thank you, Chairman Gaida and members of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. My name is John Olson. I am the director for the Internet Association here in the Northeast. We represent a number of internet-based platforms, including Airbnb, Expedia, Turo, and others. I will keep my remarks brief. I will just note that, what we just heard from DRA is that there doesn't seem to be any real value in passing this legislation in respect to collecting revenue. This is simply shifting the responsibility to out-of-state internet platforms. A lot of these platforms are how New Hampshire residents are currently making ends meet or supplementing their incomes. They have certainly found ways to turn liabilities into assets with respect to their vehicles and their homes. I would also note that the OTA and OTC tax should be construed as a new tax, as it does apply not just to home sharing companies, but also online travel agents. The legislation was amended to remove the taxation on commissions, but does apply to service fees and the total consumer cost of renting through an online travel platform. So this should be considered a new tax. The other thing I should note is that with the peer-to-peer car sharing, as we've heard in previous testimony, there are about 400 current consumers in New Hampshire utilizing the platform, using their vehicles, their personal vehicles. Turo and other car sharing platforms do not have fleets, and the services mentioned on their website are to provide convenience, not just to the consumer, but also to the hosts, because they're not going to run out and save folks who are broken down on the road or take personal calls from folks who are using their vehicle for a few days. So I just want to point out that the real distinction between a traditional rental company and a peer-to-peer car sharing platform is simply that these cars are personal vehicles, and it is a facilitation between someone who needs a vehicle and someone who has a vehicle within the state. There are no fleets, and there are no other, advantages, so to speak, that traditional car rental companies currently enjoy. I think that might be 2 minutes, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Okay, Senator Daniels, followed
you.
by Senator Rosenwald.
At what point in time does something become a fleet?
A fleet? Well, I mean, I don't want to quantify what we're currently seeing with car rental companies, but I would say several hundred.
Follow up?
Please.
So if I had the financial means and I went out and I bought 100 vehicles, then I potentially could fit into this area where I would not be taxed. Is that correct?
If you're saying you would personally purchase 100 vehicles of your own to utilize on a car sharing platform, as opposed to opening your own car rental place?
Yes.
By the letter of the law, I suppose you would avoid the tax. However, that scenario seems highly unlikely given the number of current hosts.
Okay,
But
thank you.
if you're saying that if the potential scenario is that to avoid being defined as a traditional car rental company, there may be a loophole in the law that would need to be addressed. But right now we're talking about individuals with a single vehicle, maybe another vehicle that they don't use as often, and that's what they're putting on the platform to turn whatever monthly cost that vehicle incurs into at least some kind of supplemental income.
Okay,
I don't think anyone's designed to purchase multiple vehicles in order to start a business.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Rosenwald, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Olson.
Good morning, Senator.
This morning I was looking on the Turo website, and it seems that in addition to individuals renting out their car when they're not using it, it also will facilitate transactions for what it called independent car rental agencies. So I'm wondering how that makes them not really a car rental agency if they're advertising that service.
The independent car rental agency is utilizing Turo to connect with consumers?
That's what was advertised on their website.
Okay, that is a new service that I'm unaware of, but I can't imagine that car rental company is at the level of Avis or Hertz or Enterprise. That's an interesting dynamic. I don't know whether that is like surplus, from the car rental agency that they post on the platform, or if that's a new agreement.
Okay,
But thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much, Mr. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have Genevieve Strand.
Mr. Strand, welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, Chair Gaida, Vice Chair D'Alessandro, committee members. My name is Genevieve Strand. I'm the Director of Advocacy at the American Society of Travel Advisors, and I'm appearing today on the nearly 480 travel advisors in New Hampshire to express our concerns over House Bill 15, which would impose new taxes on travel agency services at a time when our members are facing an existential crisis due to the coronavirus pandemic. The average travel agency has laid off close to 60% of its staff, and its average business income in 2020 was down 82%. With that context, we respectfully question the wisdom of any form of a tax increase on this decimated industry at this moment in time. While we are grateful that the bill in its current form exempts commissions or compensations paid to travel agents by the operators, any fees that travel advisors charge their customers for a hotel or car rental booking in the state would be subject to new taxation. In 2019, a year when travel agencies booked $33 billion worth of hotel rooms and $6 billion in car rentals, 45% of agents charged a service fee, and an additional 20% were contemplating instituting them. These service fees are charged for saving consumers time and money by helping them navigate an increasingly complex travel marketplace, particularly in the post-pandemic world. While we are under no illusions about the budgetary challenges facing the state of New Hampshire, we respectfully request you oppose these new taxes and the administrative burdens that it would place on our overwhelmingly small businesses at a time when the travel agency industry has been brought to its knees by COVID-19. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? If I can ask, I have a question. So this tax would not be an additional burden on the company. Is the tax not levied on the actual renter of the vehicle?
So unfortunately, with the way that our business models are structured, it is sometimes set up such that the travel advisors are the ones purchasing the inventory and then packaging it to sell on to their clients. So similar to the way that an online travel company would sell these products, the business model of a traditional brick and mortar travel agency really has evolved over time to look more and more similar to the way an OTC operates. So we would sort of be caught up in those taxes simply because of the business model. So even a small agency, on average, they employ less than 10 people. It's about 86% that employ 10 people or less, would still be stuck registering with the state, collecting all of the new taxes, transferring them to the state. And that's not an insubstantial administrative burden on a very small business.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, next, Mr. Chair, we have Michael Mclaughlin.
Mike, welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me now, as you say?
We can.
Great. I'm testifying on behalf of Avail. Avail is a third-party peer-to-peer car platform. And as stated in my written materials, I think it's interesting that the basis of this attempt to increase the taxation on individuals in New Hampshire or level the playing field is putting a $26.2 billion company against people in the North Country who might want to rent their car for the weekend to help people get to the doctors or to a job interview or any other type of activity where someone does not have access to an automobile. And if you look north of Concord, I think it's going to be hard to find Hertz, Avis, Enterprise, or somebody up there. So what we've done with the Avail platform, which is an emerging technology, is make the person who doesn't have a chance to rent a car to get transportation. The interesting thing about the bill as we look at it is, I think through the years of discussions with DRA, we saw the fact that no one wants to put the individual in New Hampshire on the hook for the tax. So if you look at the bill and the verbiage, they specifically exempt the individual from any liability for paying the tax. The end of the bill, you'll see the last couple of paragraphs say the tax must be collected from the platform. So what they say, no assessment shall be made except against the rental facilitator or against the room facilitator. So by the very language of the tax, they're admitting it's a major inconvenience on the individuals in New Hampshire. So they've limited it to collectability only against a third party. I think one of the issues they saw was the individual in New Hampshire who might want to rent that car shouldn't have to register with the platform, but somewhat of an equal protection issue. And they've said, well, don't worry about it. You never have to pay it anyway. So I'll keep that in my remarks to the fact that the leveling of this playing field can never be done when you're up against billions and billions of dollars of marketing, fleet size, availability. And at this point in time, you're talking about $5,000 or $10,000 into the $1 billion New Hampshire budget. I think
Chair,
this is.
that has been 2 minutes.
I think we can wait to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. McLaughlin? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Chair, we have Steve Del Bianco. However, I don't see them under the attendees list. So if they're calling in, and I think this might be them, so we'll bring them in.
Okay.
I'm here.
Welcome, and we look forward to your testimony, sir.
Thank you. I'm Steve Del Bianco, and I'm the president of NetChoice. That's a trade association whose members include Amazon, eBay, Expedia, Facebook, Turo, and nearly all of America's leading e-commerce companies. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, HB 15 seeks to apply New Hampshire's M&R tax to the fees that travelers pay to their travel agent for the services like researching and comparing and booking a hotel room and a vacation package in New Hampshire, as Ms. Strand described very well. Now, those advisory services, they're provided at the time and the place where the travel agent delivered the services to the customer. And that's typically days or weeks before the traveler shows up at that New Hampshire hotel where all tax is currently collected for the amount the hotel receives. But this bill tries to demand that travel agents outside of New Hampshire start to add this new tax on their service fees when they're booking a New Hampshire hotel or vacation, and then file and remit to New Hampshire. Mr. Chairman, your governor, the House, this committee, and the full Senate, you debated, litigated, and you legislated the exact opposite policy in New Hampshire just a few years ago. It was 2018, and after the Wayfair ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court opened the door for foreign states and local governments to reach into New Hampshire, forcing your businesses to pay sales tax when they sell to citizens of those foreign states. Governor Sununu said, I am going to do everything in my power to fight this outrageous attempt to force New Hampshire's businesses to collect out-of-state taxes. And in response, you enacted SB 242 in 2019, and you required the foreign states to inform your AG before imposing tax burdens on your businesses. Mr. Chairman, you and Representative Major were co-sponsors of that bill, but it completely contradicts HB 15, because HB 15 tries to tax a travel agent providing services completely outside of New Hampshire to customers who aren't even residents of New Hampshire. How would New Hampshire enforce HB 15 against travel agents outside of the state? You can't rely on Wayfair. That was entirely about sales taxes and on interstate retail, not about M&R tax. So you will have contradicted your beliefs on interstate sales taxes, and that undermines your AG's cases to protect your businesses against foreign states. And you won't have the authority to enforce HB 15 on travel agents outside the state. Mr. Chairman, there may be some revenue here. As Ms. Strand explained, you do have jurisdiction to enforce this new tax on New Hampshire travel agents when they're paying and booking service for New Hampshire residents. But that new tax isn't going to amount to much, and it won't be very popular with your voters. The same is true for the part of HB 15 that requires these peer-to-peer car sharing services to add taxes. You can force a New Hampshire car and truck owner to pay M&R tax on the amount that they receive. Yes, you can, but you can't enforce the tax on the extra fees that are charged by the peer-to-peer car rental services outside of New Hampshire. So I'll conclude to say that on net, you will realize a small amount of revenue, but only from New Hampshire residents, car owners, and travel agents. And while this might be satisfying to the big hotel chains and big rental car companies who've been advocating for this bill, I think you'll realize the juice is not worth the squeeze. I look forward to your questions.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Next, Mr. Chair, we have Maura Weston.
Maura, welcome back.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard today. My name is Maura Weston, and I'm testifying today on behalf of Turo. We are testifying today in opposition to House Bill 15. This legislation captures all peer-to-peer car sharing activity, whether the transaction is through a rental facilitator, a platform, or otherwise. Our marketplace provides a service and an economic opportunity for New Hampshire car owners to earn a very small amount of extra income. Our hosts on average make about $300 a month. And as Mr. Mclaughlin pointed out, this can also provide drivers in search of a mobility option or transportation option, a solution, particularly in rural areas. I'd ask you to think about the implications of this bill on New Hampshire citizens who are hosts. Think about the college student who may only need to use a car a couple of days a week for an internship and wants to offset a bit of debt. Or think about the family who's cleaning out their basement and may perhaps like to share a pickup truck for a day, but otherwise couldn't afford one. Or think about the retiree on a fixed income who doesn't need to use their car every day of the week and could use that small bit of extra money to help offset some expenses. Neither Turo nor our hosts are rental car companies. They should neither be taxed nor regulated as one. Turo owns no vehicles. There is no fleet. The vehicles are shared and owned by New Hampshire citizens. The consideration paid by someone who shares a car is set by the host. That amount is determined by the host. The taxes imposed by HB 15 are akin to taxing my children's lemonade stand on the corner as if they're Minute Maid. The taxation and regulation, in addition, imposed by the bill is government interference with the use of personal property. By taking this step, HB 15 would, for all practical purposes, shut down the opportunity for peer-to-peer car sharing in New Hampshire. If New Hampshire truly wants to address peer-to-peer car sharing,
2 minutes.
Great. So to conclude, the NCOIL model relative to peer-to-peer car sharing has been a model adopted in approximately 14 states to address peer-to-peer car sharing issues. Thank you for the opportunity this morning.
Thank you for testifying. Are there any questions for Ms. Weston? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Maura. I'm reading from the Turo website. And it says Turo is primarily a person-to-person car sharing platform, but rental car companies can share their fleets by offering commercial rental insurance to guests. So if I'm a rental car company and I rent out my fleet through my own website, I do pay the M&R tax. But if I advertise my car rental fleet, the same fleet, on Turo, I currently don't pay the tax. Is that correct?
My understanding is that the tax is imposed on the individual sharing the vehicle. So my understanding is, I'll use an example. I grew up in Walpole, New Hampshire. On the weekends, we'd borrow a pickup truck from the company that my dad worked for. In consideration for that, we'd fill it up with gas and maybe put a few dollars into the coffee fund. That's consideration paid for the use of a vehicle. My understanding is that that's actually a taxable transaction in this case. And a person looking to share their vehicle, or in this case, the company my dad worked for, would be the owner who would have to be licensed and regulated by DRA. So in response to your question, I'm not familiar with how these car rental companies work, but the tax is actually imposed on the person using the vehicle. And what HB 15 does is it shifts for those people who use a platform, and only for those people who use a platform, it shifts the liability to collect and remit.
Could I follow up, please?
Please.
Thank you. But so if I'm a rental car company and I am paying the tax, I'm responsible for it through my own website, aren't I avoiding taxation by switching and advertising the same fleet, the same business to Turo? In which case, then I would, because I'm using a different platform, I wouldn't be responsible for paying the tax on the cars that I own and rent out.
Well, and I think what you're getting at is two very different business models. And I'm not quite, I'd have to inquire because I'm not quite sure how these, what I know to be two very different models are working together as you described. I mean, rental car companies, they own the cars, they buy the cars, they depreciate the cars, they sell the cars. That's one business model. Peer-to-peer car sharing has been recognized, as I said, in many states as a very different business model. And the platform itself does not, they don't own the cars, they don't have any control. I suspect any fleet owner, if you were a fleet owner, would have to be licensed in New Hampshire. And so they would be liable to the state of New Hampshire if they own a fleet. It's the rental car companies and the peer-to-peer car sharing platforms are two very different business models, as I understand it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Maura.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Steve Sher.
Steve, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Steve Sher. I'm the president of the Travel Technology Association. I represent the world's leading online travel companies such as Expedia, Priceline, Airbnb, and many others. So there's a lot going on in this legislation, and I'm trying to break it down into the components that we're concerned with. There's a car sharing component, there's short-term rental tax implications, and then there are tax implications for hotel rooms and car rentals that are booked on sites like Expedia and Priceline. With respect to the intent of the legislation as the speaker presented, if the intent of this legislation is about car sharing, we strongly urge this committee to narrow the scope of this legislation to just car sharing. What really is taking place here is that it's an expansion of the tax and the applicability of the meals and rooms tax to all transactions for short-term rentals, for hotel rooms booked on online travel sites, and for car rentals booked on online travel sites. It's important to note that New Hampshire is already getting all the applicable taxes on hotels and car rentals that are booked via online travel sites. For short-term rentals, because of Airbnb's agreement with the state, as well as the local property managers and realtors who are collecting the tax on behalf of the homeowners, I would say that New Hampshire is getting the taxes on virtually all short-term rentals in the state. But really, I'd like to focus on the transactions of hotel bookings via online travel sites, as well as car rentals. Most importantly, to clear up a few myths, online travel sites do not buy rooms and resell them. They simply are travel agents, and they charge the consumer a travel agent service fee, which would be subject to this tax under this legislation, to the meals and rooms tax under this legislation. If you think about it, when you book a room on Expedia or Priceline or Orbitz, the amount you pay includes three components: the room rate, all the taxes on the room, which is then sent to the hotel for remittance to the state and the local jurisdiction, and a small service fee that the travel agent charges the traveler for the service of being able to search and compare their travel. The hotel controls the price. There's only one room rate.
That's been 2 minutes.
Oh, wow, that was fast.
I know.
All right. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, I'd like you to elaborate, Steve, on your suggestion that we differentiate or we split out the two parts of the several parts of the business. Could you do that?
Certainly, not with respect to the business, but with respect to the intent of the legislation. My understanding having participated in the House proceedings, the Speaker's intent is to clearly establish a new regulatory regime for Turo and peer-to-peer car sharing services like them. What we have seen is that the legislation was amended to ensnare other transactions, such as short-term rental bookings via online platforms, hotel and car rental bookings via online travel sites like Expedia and Priceline. And we really believe that if the intent of this legislation is about leveling the playing field or addressing peer-to-peer car sharing, that it should do just that. And we have some suggestions on how to do that, and we'd be happy to work with the committee on that topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the committee? If none, thanks for your testimony, and if you wouldn't mind contacting me after or sometime later today or later this week, that'd be fine. Thank you.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next we have signed up to speak is a Carl, and I apologize if I butcher this last name, Carl Sasbo. However, I do not see them under attendees. So if they're calling in via phone, you can dial *9 to virtually raise your hand. In the meantime, we have Chris Gilrain, who is signed up next to speak.
Mr. Gilrain, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will keep this testimony brief. I also submitted written testimony. My name is Chris Gilrain. I represent TechNet in the Northeast. We are an industry organization that represents companies throughout the innovation spectrum, small and large companies, including several peer-to-peer car sharing platforms. I'm here to testify respectfully in opposition to HB 15FN. For your constituents who put their cars on the platform, peer-to-peer car sharing services have unlocked the dormant earning potential of what is, for most people, one of their biggest investments, and one that generally sits idle most of the time. Looking out my window right now, we're clearly heading into the season where the lakes and mountains will be calling people to New Hampshire. Hopefully entertainment venues will be welcoming crowds back soon, and there will be an increased demand for new mobility options. That means more opportunities for folks in the state to earn some extra income and more reasons to avoid imposing taxes that might hinder those opportunities and boost the state's tourism industry. These platforms, peer-to-peer platforms, simply provide the marketplace in which individuals can loan out their personal vehicle to others. HB 15 would levy a tax on what is essentially a transaction between neighbors simply because it was facilitated by a digital intermediary. Again, I've submitted written testimony and I urge the committee not to advance HB 15. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your indulgence here.
Thank you, Mr. Gilrain. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Chair, next we have Krissa Alexis.
Krissa, welcome.
Hey, good morning, Chairman Gaida, Vice Chair D'Alessandro, and members of the committee. My name is Krissa Alexis. I'm a New Hampshire resident. I live in Windham. I'm actually based out of Londonderry, though, for work. With Enterprise Holdings, I'm an employer of nearly 400 residents of New Hampshire with over 30 locations across the state. And in my written testimony, I referenced a website that has the cities and towns in each of your districts in case you want to ask or want to mention the number of locations. So as the regional vice president overseeing Enterprise Holdings operations here in New Hampshire, and as of the last time we were discussing this bill, we were proud to have contributed over $8 million in state tax revenues. We've also spent over $7 million with local New Hampshire businesses in the auto industry, and we donated more than $46,000 to charitable organizations in our great state. Needless to say, but I will, we are heavily invested in New Hampshire to the continued prosperity of the families we employ and to our communities. So my involvement in this bill began because Enterprise supports a very simple principle, which is equal rules of the road for all rental car transactions. As it has been stated, this is not a new tax. This bill merely ensures the tax due under the current law is actually collected and remitted. It's about compliance and fairness. We collect and remit the tax when we rent a car. We only want to make sure it happens across the board. What we do know is the way rental car transactions are conducted has changed and evolved since the original tax rules were written. There are new platforms for car rentals, and as a result, in many cases, uncertainty. These platforms don't collect the tax, and not all of their users realize they need to collect and remit the tax. The bill adds clarity, it facilitates compliance, it asks these platforms just to collect and remit the tax and transactions on their platforms to create a level playing field for everyone renting a car. So it's not a new tax, and these platforms, although being asked to collect and remit, don't actually pay the tax. They act as trustee to collect the tax from the renter, the tax due under current law, and remit it to the DRA. So there was conversation earlier, and I thought Senator Rosenwald posed some good questions about who is able to rent a car on the platform. And here in the state of New Hampshire, the big rental car companies that was mentioned by some of the opponents, but I'd like to draw attention, if you are on their website, to the number of dealerships that own fleets of vehicles. They use them as loaner cars if you were to take your car in to get an oil change or a tire replacement.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's been 2 minutes.
Oh, that did go fast.
It goes so fast.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and obviously we are in favor of this bill, and I did submit a written testimony. So if you have questions, I'm happy to take them, but that's my 2 minutes.
Any questions from members of the committee? Thank you. Hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, so the last person we have signed up to speak is Henry Vayu.
Henry, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'll be quick. For the record, my name is Henry Vayu, and I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association. The association strongly supports House Bill 15. We think it's long overdue. There are many bed and breakfasts, small inns throughout the state that compete with a lot of these properties that are put on these online platforms. And yes, there are folks that on occasion rent out their places, but there are also folks that rent them time after time after time after time after time, and it's become a business for them. And for our brick and mortar properties that compete with these, we're fine with the competition. We just want the tax to be applied evenly. And there are folks that rent theirs that do pay the rooms meals tax to the state, but there are others that the state is not aware of. And this bill will make it a lot easier to collect the tax. So we are strong support of the bill. Thanks.
All right, any questions for Henry? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Chair, the last person we had signed up to speak that has yet spoken is Carl Sizabo. Again, I apologize, I'm butchering that, and I don't see them under attendees. So if they're calling in via phone, this would be the appropriate time to virtually raise your hand by dialing *9. And I do not see any hands raised, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Would anyone else that has spoken before or hasn't spoken yet further testify with a 2-minute limit?
Representative Packard and Representative Almy have their hands raised.
All right, I'll give you one, but not both. Speaker Packard.
Mr. Speaker, you should be all set to unmute yourself.
How's that?
That sounds good.
Couple of things that I just found a little bit outrageous is, first of all, a couple of points. If you go to your neighbor and you borrow his truck and put some gas in it, this is not going to come underneath the rooms and meals tax. If you go to your boss and borrow his pickup truck, to pick up a refrigerator or something, it is not going to come underneath the rooms and meals tax. And one of the last speakers said, well, they're just loaning out vehicles. All you need to do is look at the website. They are not loaning vehicles. They are renting their vehicles. And that's why we put this bill in, because they're saying that it's peer-to-peer. It's not peer-to-peer. People are renting their vehicles. It's a different platform. And I just don't want this to be misconstrued what it is not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are there any questions for Speaker Packard? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, again, I see no other hands raised from the public. It's just Representative Almey's hand, so.
All right. Representative Almey, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to ask you to bring back Carolyn Lear because the DRA has been collecting on a lot of taxes from places that are not based in New Hampshire, but have activities in New Hampshire for a very long time. And it was alleged that this was something that after we tried and failed to stop Wayfair from happening, that we should no longer do that. But it is a general practice to make our taxes fair and equitable across the markets. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any questions for Representative Almey? Seeing none, thank you very much. And Ava, I suspect there are no further witnesses ready to testify. So at this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 15 FN, and we will open the hearing on House Bill 626.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Representative Abrami, you should be all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. For the record, Pat Abrami, Rockingham 19 Stratham. I'm here to introduce House Bill 626, the House version of the historic racing bill. This committee voted 5-0 ought to pass on Senate Bill 112, the Senate version of the historic racing bill. That was voted ought to pass by the full Senate 20-4. House Ways and Means voted ought to pass 16-5 on this bill, House Bill 626, which passed on the House floor in a very bipartisan vote of 223 to 152. These two bills are identical with the exception of 3 grammatical errors. The House Ways and Means researcher did a side-by-side to verify this. The three technical things are in the Senate bill, the term historic was used in the title, and the House bill historic was used in the title. The second thing in Section 5, Roman 2, the second line in the House bill leaves an A out between the words Ben and game. It should have said Ben and game, Ben a game. The Senate version is correct. In the Section 5, Roman 3, the second line of the Senate bill refers to the historic horse races, and in the House version, it refers to all house races. The House version is the correct one. But all of these are minor issues that are would be picked up in Roman process. And I did share this side by side with the chair. My preference is that the House version of these identical bills be the one that moves forward. In conversation with Senator French, the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 112, he graciously suggested the same. Just a few remarks about why this bill. Charitable gaming has been with us for a decade and a half, supporting 500 charities at 16 licensed charitable gaming locations, raising $8 to $10 million annually for our charities. As can be seen, this has become a major fundraising vehicle for our charities. And as you know, the charities very much support this bill. As for pari-mutuel racing, it was first approved in New Hampshire in 1933 and had a great run at 4 primary tracks in New Hampshire. As live horse and dog racing faded, in the New Hampshire legislature approved simulcast racing to occur at those 4 locations only. today only the Seabrook location offers simulcast. The point is that our lottery commission is very familiar with pari-mutuel wagering and the technology behind it, which is identical to the HHR technology. Lottery is already very prepared to take on HHR oversight. I support this bill because HHR will generate an additional 5.7 million for our charities and an additional 12 million for our education trust fund annually. In addition, the lottery estimates that $820,000 from breakage will be generated annually, which will all go to the Problem Gaming Fund. There is also a long wait list of charities that want to participate in charitable gaming. And this bill opens an opportunity for more charities to participate. Remember, this bill adds one new game to the portfolio of games that are currently offered at these locations. With that said, I would like to remind the committee that you voted down an amendment requiring opt-in vote by a municipality to allow HHR to be played in their jurisdiction. A similar amendment was voted down in the House Ways and Means Committee as well as on the House floor. I have 5 reasons why this is not a good idea, but I'm going to summarize by just simply saying HHR can only be played at a licensed charitable gaming location, and there is no opt-in requirement today to allow a new licensed facility to open in any municipality. Instead, municipalities have used zoning ordinances to limit the locations within their jurisdictions. In addition, there has never been an opt-in vote required to allow any new game to be played at any of these charitable gaming locations. Also, a reminder, all issues surrounding charitable gaming will be taken up in a commission or joint committee approved by both the House and the Senate, with the makeup of that commission still needing to be worked out between the bodies. There was a House bill and there was a Senate bill, and that may occur in a conference. No big deal, just a makeup of how many senators and how many House members and from which committees they come from. So I'm going to stop there, not to be redundant. There's plenty more I can say on this. You've heard a lot on this bill. It's identical to Senate Bill 112. So you've heard a lot of testimony already. So I'll stop here and answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any questions for Representative Abrami? Hearing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Next, we have Chief Michael Kerrigan.
Chief, welcome.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Can you all hear me okay?
We sure can.
Thank you. My name is Michael Kerrigan. I'm the Chief of Police of the Nashua Police Department, and I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 626. I will be brief. I know your time is limited. I just want to say a couple of things. I'm testifying today as a chief of the Nashua Police Department, but also as a member on 2 boards of nonprofits in Nashua who benefit from charitable gaming. As you can imagine, the last year and a half has been extremely difficult on nonprofits to be able to raise money and ask people to help continue to support them during these tough times. Their budgets, our budgets, have been surviving on the money we're getting from charitable gaming, and that really keeps them afloat until we can get back into the flow of normal life, if that ever comes. So I want to say, as a board that sits on those, that money is critical for us. And if we have several that can't survive because there's not enough, this will help boost them to add other charities to be able to obtain funding. The second thing I'm going to say is, if these nonprofits start to close down, and the nonprofits in Nashua don't just benefit Nashua, they benefit Nashua, Hollis, Hudson, as all the surrounding communities, as do other charities up in Manchester and throughout the state. As these nonprofits for us in policing are who we do the warm handoff to for our issues. So, for example, if we're dealing with somebody on domestic violence, who's a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, we have bridges that we can send our people to and get the help that we need immediately. That relationship, we work hard with bridges. We know what they're capable of. We support them. They depend on that money to take the issue that we handle immediately. We kind of deal with the emergency of the situation, and then we know who to hand it off to. The people at Bridges, the people at Marguerite's Place, the people at PAL, all these nonprofits are there to help get the people the right services that they need. If you start to take that money away from them and they start to close down, that's going to have to be absorbed by the state through taxes. And that's not an avenue we want to go down. So I think that I just want you to know, and again, I'm going to wrap up. I just think that as a board member, that income has been our lifeblood. And as a police chief, it has allowed us to continue to get the services, especially during these troubled times, to people that are suffering mental health, victims of sexual assault. Any of those services that are needed, it's still there to help us connect with them. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, are there any questions for the chief? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Okay, next, Mr. Chair, we have Michael Remy.
Mr. Remy, welcome.
You should be all set to unmute yourself, Mr. Remy. You appear to be unmuted.
Hello, sorry, I had stepped away for a second and came back just at this moment. So of course my timing is great on that. I'm assuming at this point we've moved back into into 626.
We are in 626, sir. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I am a city councilor for the city of Keene, and I don't want to speak specifically on the merits of the bill itself as far as whether or not this should pass as written for the intent. My concern is that the date that was chosen, May 20th, as the date for this to become eligible, excludes one license holder in the state of New Hampshire who happens to be in the city of Keene. So he'd be the one active license holder who would be ineligible to participate in this and be protected for the 3 years of that. So that's my concern on this. As far as whether or not the bill itself should pass, that's not my area of expertise.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Ramey? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that is all we have signed up to speak for this bill. So if anyone wishes to speak, this would be the appropriate time to raise your hand virtually or dial *9 if you're calling in via phone. And I see no hands, Mr. Chair.
Very well. At this point then, with no further people to testify, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 626. And how far behind are we here?
We are almost an hour behind.
Well, we might as well get to our, let's get to our hearings. I'm sorry, on the revenue estimates. And I think we start with Mr. Sher.
Chris, I can't seem to promote you to panelist. Ava, can you promote him? I don't seem to have the option. Oh, Ava, you're muted.
Classic. I think what I need to do is remove him and then I can do it if you want me to try that. So Chris,
Yeah, I didn't see the option when he was in the attendees column either, but why don't you try it?
All right, Chris,
I'll sit tight
and bring you back in, okay?
Thank you.
Bring Shay back.
Here I am. Let me just get myself situated here.
You should be all set. Oh, yep, we can see
Yep.
you.
There I am. Thank you. Thank you for bringing me in. I'll be brief. I know that DRA is going to follow me, and I think that they probably have more interesting information to share with the committee as it relates to revenues than I really do. But to start with, you should have gotten a document forwarded to you from Sonia. It's a 4-page PDF file. And what it is the House Ways and Means compared to the governor's revenue estimates. If you were to look, I can share my screen if it's easier for the committee. Just so I can, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, what's the committee's preference? I'm okay with that.
It's fine.
Okay.
That's great, Bruce.
So you should see the document on your screen now. And the first page of that document is the revenue estimates under current law. So you have the governor's estimate, you have the plan for 2021, which is in the first column. You can see me kind of going over that. And then the governor's estimates that were presented on February 11th. And then the House Ways and Means estimates that were revised on 3/18. And then you can see the differences in those figures. One thing to note is that for fiscal year 21, the anomalous revenue of $30.8 million is removed from each of the revenue sources. So at the bottom of that page, you see a table that shows you that for the business taxes, for example, 18.2 million has been removed from the number that you would find in, say, the revenue focus or in any cash basis document that you might be looking at right now.
So the 30.8 is the number, Chris.
30.8 was the amount of revenue that came in the door in fiscal year 21 that was really revenue that should have been attributed to fiscal year 2020.
Right.
Correct. So when you look at the revenue focus, which is a document that the Department of Administrative Services puts out, that's on a cash basis. So that number is in there in the cash numbers, but then on a table that they have on the last page, they do remove it at the end of the summing up of all the revenue. But in this case, it's removed before that. Again, to get a base number when they were doing estimates related to the revenue.
Sure.
Then you scroll to page 2. Those are all the changes to current law that are being proposed. So the governor had a number of things in his version of House Bill 2, and then the House had other things that they included in House Bill 2 or made changes from what the governor had. Many of these are related to your business taxes or revenues that are collected and dealt with by DRA. And I had made a suggestion to Chairman Gaida that DRA come back on a separate day to talk to you about these various changes, because some of them I think might require a little bit more discussion. I think I've also heard comments from a couple of members too that the House didn't consider or hadn't included the Senate Bill 3, which is the PPP bill.
Right.
I would just note that the House was looking at bills that they would have been working on and would have passed. And at that point, the Senate on the 3/18 was that day they passed the Senate Bill 3 over to the House. So it wasn't considered at that point when the House Ways and Means was meeting. So again, it's just really bills or sections of House Bill 2 that they had before them. So this would be considered the House position on revenues. And then the last 2 pages is the first one is the highway fund, and the last page is the fish and game fund. Those are also unrestricted revenues that the committee will provide estimates on, and you'll hear from Department of Safety road tolls that they do the majority of the gas tax piece and the motor vehicle fees, which is self-explanatory for the most part. But within motor vehicle fees, you do have some revenue that is transferred from the judicial branch that goes into that number. And then the miscellaneous revenue of 200,000 is money that comes from the Department of Transportation. So with the highway fund, many times people think that you're going to hear estimates from the Department of Transportation when in fact they're the agency that spends much of that revenue, but they're not the collectors of that revenue. And then again, the last page is fish and game estimates. And you'll notice that just in fiscal year 21, there was a pretty significant bump up compared to what the plan was, 12.9 to 13.6, which is a good amount of revenue for fish and game. And a lot of that is attributable to an increase in the licenses that they've been selling. So with the pandemic, they saw a surge of people coming in to get their fish and game licenses and other types of hunting licenses that, just as a way for people to get outdoors. So this document is again meant to provide you a comparison of the governor to the House estimates as you're hearing from the agencies. I don't want to, drag it out, but wanted to make sure you had that document. And then again, I think DRA, I would defer to them for the rest of this morning so that they can get their piece done. But I will be following along with DRA and as you bring in other agencies. So if there's any questions for me as you go through this process, please reach out to me. You can email me and I'll get back to you if it's related to estimates or what an agency might have or might not have provided. Also, if you want to make some changes to House Bill 2, for instance, and you need some additional information, please reach out to me and I can assist you with that process as well. So unless there's any questions for me, I would like to defer and give the rest of my time to DRA.
Any questions for Chris?
Chris, the unknowns of the unknown, number one, and DRA is going to work on this and the House is going to work on this, is the situation regarding the PPP. That's yet to be resolved, and the estimate as to what that cost fairly significant in terms of the dollar amount. Correct?
That's correct, Senator. I think on the revised fiscal note, it's a potential loss of $65 million. But again, you have to keep in mind that DRA provides information on a static analysis. It's not a dynamic analysis. So they take the best information they have before them and try to give you the best estimate they can at that time. And if you had looked at the fiscal note on that same bill as it was introduced, there was 3 ranges provided, right. Kind of a high, low, and a medium. Right. So they've refined it to some extent, but there could be further, as more information becomes available, particularly as you get through the end of April, the DRA may come in with some additional information or have better insight as to how some of this is being handled.
Sure. So, but that's an unknown at this point.
Yep.
That's an unknown at this point in time.
And so what your committee would potentially do is, unfortunately, all the members of Senate Ways and Means are also on Senate Finance. So you during the process, you'll make a decision on the PPP and what you think the impact might be. Right. And then that would be something that would be carried on the surplus statement. Right. So all the changes from current law are found on the surplus statement. So anything that the Senate decides to do or not do, we would make adjustments on the surplus statement to reflect that as it impacts your revenues in a positive or a negative.
Right, sure. And the surplus statement that we were presented will look much different.
Potentially.
As we move forward. People should just be aware of that.
And I think you'll hear from DRA and others, particularly DRA, is that, with the pandemic, some of the revenue sources, it's been early on, there was a lot of projections that you were going to lose several $100 million of revenue, and that hasn't happened. Some revenue sources have done better. For example, right. Tobacco, with a change that occurred in Massachusetts related to the menthol and flavored cigarettes, there seems to have been a surge in cross-border sales. Right. That has helped our tobacco revenue. Right. Business taxes continue to be strong for a variety of different reasons, which DRA will discuss some of those with you when they get on the call. But as you look at the projections, you can see the governor and the House aren't really far off in some of those figures. There's a few places where there is some differences. For instance, in lottery revenue, the governor had 120 million in fiscal year 21, and the House came away with 130 million. And the way that they did that is they said on 3/18, if we were to assume plan for the rest of the year for April, May, and June, the potentially lottery should bring in $131 million, 130.6, 130.31. So they said, we'll go with 10 million more. We'll make it 130.6. As you guys go through your process, if revenue in the lottery area seems to decrease for any reason, then you could make an adjustment related to that. But I think there's a number of things going on, and as you go through the process, if there's something I can add or help you with, I will certainly be doing that.
Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Hearing none. Thanks very much. We'll be working closely together, I'm sure.
Certainly, yeah.
All right. So DRA.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Stepp, I just promoted you to panelist. Can you remind me, was there anyone else you wanted me to bring in with you?
Sure, Melissa Rollins, please.
Commissioners, welcome. Good to see you again, Lizzie.
Nice to see you too. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for having us today. Okay, looks like Melissa is here as well. Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen so I can put the presentation up so everyone can see it.
Please do. Please do.
Okay, are you able to see my screen? Should be able to see the presentation. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sonia. Okay, good morning again. Thank you for having us. We are here today to talk about revenue estimates. So we produced revenue estimates for the main DRA taxes, the business taxes, meals and rentals tax, tobacco tax, interest and dividends tax, communication service tax, real estate transfer tax, and utility property tax. What you'll see on the first page here is our estimate range, as Chris mentioned, with the anomalous receivable removed for fiscal year 21. So this is going to serve as your base for 21 will serve as your base, and then we'll determine some growth rates for fiscal years 22 and 23 in order for you to arrive at your revenue estimates over the biennium. A few things to note, you will see under business taxes and interest in dividends tax, we have TBD. Given that it is April 19th and we are in the midst of literally collecting millions of dollars every day right now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about those taxes. I talked to the chair and we'll come back in May and give a better overview of those taxes and talk about a range at that time. We just felt it was a little bit premature to start talking about those taxes. But instead we'll kind of focus on the other taxes that DRA collects to hopefully get everyone comfortable where those taxes are landing. You'll see in the far right-hand column for fiscal year 21, some of our taxes are performing well, as Chris mentioned, others are performing not as well. So for instance, our high range compared to plan has meals and rentals tax down 17%, but has tobacco tax up 22%. So we will again go through these taxes individually to kind of explain to you what we're seeing and the trends that we believe will happen through the end of the year. Once we determine a base based on for fiscal year 21, we'll then talk about growth rates for each tax for 22 and 23. So moving on quickly just to business taxes, we did want to note where things stand as of today. So fiscal year to date through March, we are 100.7 million or 21% ahead of plan. This does include the 18.3 of the anomalous receivable, and we're 113.1 or 24.2 ahead of prior year. What we're seeing in terms of effects of the COVID pandemic on business activity, that'll really start showing in returns that we're receiving in March and now in April. That will have the detail for us that will show us what businesses have been experiencing during calendar year 2020. I would note that there is a 7-month extension to file the actual return if the liability is fully paid. So those calendar year 2020 returns could be coming in as late as the fall. So it may be a little bit of time before we have the full data, but we are looking at returns to see what the effect of COVID has been on businesses, although by and large, revenue is ahead of plan and ahead of prior year. Obviously, we've seen some of the largest stimulus packages that the federal government has ever infused into the economy. We believe that is certainly helping businesses and helping business taxes perform well. And then unemployment rates, which have fluctuated over the past year, and just the economy as a whole in terms of the effects of COVID, and then the potential recovery that we'll be seeing. So for fiscal year 21 through 23 ranges, fiscal year 21, you will see in the second column is 561.6 million, 17.2% ahead of plan when you remove the anomalous receivable. And in terms of ranges for 22 and 23, we're looking at growth of 2 to 6% in 22 and 3 to 5% in 23. That's really just based on what economists are predicting in terms of where GDP will go from here. Again, once we have some better data off of our returns, we may refine those ranges, but that's what we're looking at this point in time. And again, we'll be back with actual data for April in mid-May, so we can talk about these taxes in greater detail. Melissa, moving on to meals and rentals tax.
Sure, thank you. So meals and rentals tax, we have a historical breakdown up top. We typically provide this just as reference. This tax has been the hardest hit, as Lindsay had said, for the pandemic so far. Fiscal year to date, we're down 61.7 million or 20.8% below plan. And then fiscal year to date for prior year, we're down 45.9 million or 16.3% below plan. Both of those do include a $1.6 million anomalous receivable. However, maybe some good news around the corner with the COVID-19 vaccine distribution, as well as consumer confidence rising, and then some lifted travel restrictions. We do think the recovery rate coming out of this pandemic will definitely increase. And I think we'll start to see that with these spring months and then a lot more in the summer. For our low, what we're predicting or estimating is 315.4 million in 21. That's 18% below plan. So you can see that's a gradual improvement, as right now we are 20.8% below plan. And we think, again, this is based on some consumer confidence. And then as all these outdoor dining options are happening, I'm sure you've seen them in your area. There was a quick switch during the pandemic to allow this outdoor dining options to happen. You can see this on Main Street in Concord driving down. There's areas that didn't have it before and now have expanded, and that's definitely a help for restaurants as well, again, for consumer confidence. And then our high for 21 is 17% below plan, so a slight increase over the low. And this is based on some of the same factors that I just discussed, coupled with that travel restrictions being lifted for us, as well as some other states, and then potentially consumers trying to get back to normal after the long year that we have been through. For 22 and 23% growth rates, starting with 22, we have a 5% to 10% growth rate on meals and rentals tax. The low is equal to 2018 M&R revenue, and the high is equal to 2019 revenue. Again, we're starting at a low point. We're trying to bring it up. We're anticipating it to come up that 5 to 10%. And then for 23, we're anticipating it to get back to historical growths, which is around 5%. So we have a growth rate there between 4 and 6%, depending on how 22 does perform. Happy to answer any questions on this tax.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none. Next.
On to tobacco tax. So again, at the top, we have the historic breakdown, 92% cigarette stamps, which are the stamps that go on the actual packs of cigarettes, and then 8% of other tobacco products. That would be your loose tobacco. E-cigarettes are now included in other tobacco products. So fiscal year to date, we're 32.7 million or 21.8% ahead of plan, or 31.6 million or 20.9% ahead of prior year. As Chris mentioned, Massachusetts does have a ban on mentholated tobacco and other flavored tobacco products, and we believe that's continued to drive the increase that we've been seeing in revenues. Other surrounding states have also seen this trend. I've spoken with the commissioner in Rhode Island, and she's seeing similar increase in tobacco revenues in Rhode Island as well. So for fiscal year 21, coming up with a low and a high range, you'll see 240.2 to 245.1. The low end assumes that the increase due to the Massachusetts flavor ban just kind of continues at the consistent rate that we've seen all year. And then the high end, which there's only a $5 million difference between the two, but the high end assumes what we've seen in terms of an increase for the Massachusetts ban, but also, as Melissa mentioned, with travel restrictions being lifted and people being able to more freely cross state borders, we would see an increase in our cross-border sales given our lower tax rate compared to surrounding states. In terms of fiscal year 22 and 23, historically, we would see a year-over-year loss in tobacco tax revenue. This has been a pretty consistent trend. So you'll see that in fiscal year 23, where we go from a -4% to -1%. We have a flat range to a slight loss in 22, again, assuming that this Massachusetts flavor ban kind of continues to help bolster revenues a little bit, but we might be reaching kind of more of a new normal in fiscal year 22. And then again, the reduction in fiscal year 23. So again, tobacco tax has been a strong performer during COVID, not something we necessarily would have thought we would have seen in terms of strong performance when COVID began, but we're pretty confident in these numbers as we finish up fiscal year 21. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, Melissa, moving on to IND.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner, good morning. On the tobacco tax, do you have an estimate for how much is driven by the Massachusetts menthol ban and how much is actually driven by New Hampshire residents smoking more because they're home and potentially indicating that we're looking at increased stress, anxiety, and addiction?
Sure.
Because of the correlation between those conditions and increased smoking.
That's a great question. The only thing I have is really anecdotal evidence. We have spoken with some retailers who operate close to the border with Massachusetts, and they have noticed and shared with us that they've seen a very significant increase in the sale of their flavored or mentholated products. But to your other point, in terms of maybe just increased use by New Hampshire residents, given the stress of stay-at-home orders, the pandemic in general, we do believe we've seen some of that as well. Looking at the data, we do see that there seems to be some stock up of products every few months, where the wholesalers will come and buy a significant amount of stamps. They'll kind of use them down over a couple months, and then they'll buy again. We saw that in March and April of last year, and we kind of attributed that initial stock up to uncertainty about whether we would be able to continue even selling stamps, right? There was a lot of uncertainty about just the availability for any business to operate. So we saw that initial stock up in March and April, and then we've kind of continued to see it every few months. So I do think it's a little bit of both of what you're describing, the mentholated ban in Massachusetts, but there also is likely potentially just some underlying increase in usage, or at least not that same decrease that we see year over year. But I don't have any specific data to help break that down, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right. Hearing none. Next.
Great. So interest and dividends tax. As Lindsay had said, we don't have a prediction for this tax yet. However, we do have some information just to let you know what's going on so far. We have the breakdown for interest and dividends tax below the subtitle. Fiscal year to date, we are 19.1 million or 35.9% ahead of plan. This includes a $9.2 million of anomalous receivable. So a large amount there. And then we are 21.3 or 41.8% ahead of prior year. This tax, it's important to note, there are historical swings in this tax, making it somewhat difficult to predict future revenues, as it does have some spikes and valleys in it. Other things to consider: the stock market has continued to perform well. People have more money in the bank, partly due to the stimulus packages that Lindsay had spoke to earlier. And so far, this tax appears to be unaffected by COVID-19. However, to date, we want to note that returns are coming in April, and those returns are for the COVID period activity. So we may see a difference once those are fully filed. One other thing we do want to note, and we're sure you've heard about this, is that the IRS did extend the due date for individuals to pay their returns to May 17th of 2021. However, New Hampshire's due date does remain the same as April 15th. So we will keep an eye on this as well to make sure that taxpayers are filing in April 15th. We'll do some analysis to make sure that we're not missing some data. As we know, last time, even though the due date was extended for New Hampshire, from April to June, taxpayers did file in July, which was the federal due date. So just another piece that we will keep an eye on at the end of April to make sure we don't have any residual revenue flowing in from May. So for fiscal year 21, once removing the anomalous receivable, we're 63.1 million ahead of plan, or 18.6%. For our growth ranges for this tax for 22, we have a 4 to 6% growth range. That's based on past performance of this tax, and then we coupled that with the anticipated GDP that we spoke about for business taxes. And for fiscal year 23, we have 2 to 4%. We're slowing the growth a bit with this tax because we have that jump up in 22, and again, coupled with past historical performances, and also with the anticipated reduction of the GDP. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Senator Daniels, probably should have asked this before. What makes up an anomalous receivable?
Sure. Lindsay, do you want me to take that, or do you want to take it?
Sure, I can take it. That's a great question, Senator. So there's receivables every year. And what a receivable is revenue that we receive in July and August at the start of the fiscal year, where the underlying activity is really attributable to the prior year. So a really simple example is the meals and rentals tax. You have a hamburger at a restaurant in June, you pay the tax when you pay your bill, that tax is reported to us in July. So the underlying activity for that meals and rentals tax happened in June, but we didn't receive the revenue until July. So a receivable is really just an accounting term when we're completing the state's annual financial report that puts the revenue in the correct fiscal year based on when the underlying activity occurred. So again, we have those every year. What was anomalous in 21 for 20 revenue really is business and interest and dividends tax, where we had those taxpayers that Melissa mentioned that followed the federal due date of July 15th instead of the New Hampshire due date, which was June 15th, and the original New Hampshire due date was actually April 15th. So because of that due date extension, we received a lot of money in July that we really should have received in June, and the underlying activity was attributable to that prior fiscal year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Hearing none.
Okay.
Next.
Great. Communication services tax. You'll see a trend here. I have the easier taxes and Melissa gets to take the more complicated ones. So communication services tax, we are currently 0.3 million or 300,000 below plan, which is about 1%. And we are 400,000 or 1.4% ahead of prior year. This tax performs pretty consistently. The taxability of video conferencing and increased use of those sorts of products have been beneficial in terms of helping us maintain communication services tax during COVID. We've seen a decreased use of VoIP as people have not necessarily used VoIP services. Like my desk phone, for instance, in my office is a VoIP phone. The pandemic, with people leaving their offices or not being in the office as much, we've seen a decreased use of VoIP. But again, the video conferencing has kind of bolstered that loss. You'll see that we have actually no range, just 39.1 million for 21 and flat for 22 and 23. Again, pretty simple tax to estimate. We might see a slight fluctuation from that 39.1, but we're pretty confident in that number. And again, it's been a pretty consistent tax over the past few years, so we don't expect much fluctuation going into 22 or 23. Nice and easy. Now for real estate transfer tax, Melissa. Oh, you're on mute, Melissa.
Thank you. I was hoping not to do that. Real estate transfer tax, as you're probably very familiar with this and what's going on because it's all over the news how well the real estate market is doing. Fiscal year to date, we are 27% or 32.8 million ahead of plan, and 27.3 or 21.5% ahead of prior year. For that prior year, I do want to note that we would be a little bit further ahead of prior year, except this year we did have a $5 million transfer from RET into the Affordable Housing Fund per RSA 78B. That's the first time this transfer has occurred. So when comparing apples to apples, you would want to add in 5 million to last year to see what that percentage growth would be. Other items to consider for real estate transfer tax are mortgage interest rates, which have been and are historically low and stable at this point. Some different trends with virtual home sales, available housing, and property values. And we want to couple that with some offset of inventory shortages, the cost of building supplies increasing dramatically, as well as a lower affordability factor than we've seen compared to the beginning of the pandemic. And lastly, what does play into RET is the overall recovery of the economy, unemployment rates, and consumer confidence, as this is what people are basing their ability to buy and purchase homes on. For fiscal year 21, DRI's low, our estimated low is 201.5 million. This is maintaining that 27% ahead of plan that we currently have for the rest of the fiscal year. And then our high is 205.7 million. And this is assuming a 30% ahead of plan, which is increasing the next couple of months a little bit higher than what we're seeing already for our low. For fiscal year 22, this is a little bit harder to estimate out. As you know, like I just stated, real estate transfer tax has been performing very well, but we do have some caution, and we read about it in the news. We've heard about it a lot with this inventory shortage that keeps occurring, as well as the construction costs being very high. So our range for 22 is a -7% to a -2%. And we're assuming that the fiscal year starts off with the continued strong performance that we're seeing currently in fiscal year 21. And then it gradually shifts down as we end the end of 22, getting us to those ranges. And then for 23, we have -10% to -8%. And how we came up with those ranges where we sort of removed the pandemic activity out of the equation and looked at what would the rate be, or what would it look like in 23 if we had continued to grow at the typical rate of historical past performances for RET. And doing that got us to a -8% to -10% to -8% for growth. This also falls in lines with economists' predictions that we've heard through the various presentations that we have attended. Happy to answer any questions on this tax.
Any questions? Hearing none. Next.
Okay, another easy one. Utility property tax. So fiscal year to date, we're 500,000 or 2.1% ahead of plan. And compared to prior year, we're 400,000 or 1.7% ahead of prior year. Really, this tax is based on the values of these utility properties. They may decline or change due to changes in the economic conditions, although we really haven't seen a significant impact based on COVID-19. So we're pretty confident in the fact that this tax will just continue to perform as we've seen historically. Obviously, if new taxable property is constructed, then we would potentially see an increase, but we're not aware of any of that at this point in time. So for fiscal year 21, we have a fixed amount at 42.8 million, and then we have no growth in 22 and 23, again, just based on the fact that the values for these properties generally are pretty static. We don't anticipate any factors that would materially impact this tax over the next 2 years.
Okay, questions? All right.
All right, so our next two slides, that's basically all we have for revenue estimates. Our next two slides are summaries. So this tax is just a summary of everything that Lindsay and I have currently gone over, sort of a quick cheat sheet if you wanted to look at our ranges compared to other taxes. And then the next page, this is just an internal sheet that we use, but we thought that we would share. It's a summary sheet that has fiscal year 20 audited revenue, as well as fiscal year 21 plan. We then have the governor's latest revenue estimate as of March 3rd, as well as House Ways and Means estimate as on March 18th. Both of those estimates are pre-March data. We then show DRA's estimates for as of today that we just went over with you guys, as well as 22 and 23, the same layout except with growth percentages. Again, just an easy summary sheet to see where everybody falls and what the taxes are looking like from everybody's perspective.
One thing I would note when you're looking at this sheet is when you're looking at fiscal 22 and 23, I personally would focus less on the dollar amounts and focus more on the percentages. Because as we've discussed before, the Senate is in a different position than the House was and a different position than the governor was in terms of estimating the base for 21. So you will see differences in the estimates for 22 and 23 when you're looking at the dollar amounts, as that base of 21 becomes more of a fact and less of an estimate. So looking at the growth rates for 22 and 23 will tell you really where your differences lie.
Any questions?
Just when we get
Senator D, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lindsay, obviously great presentation. In the past, we used to get that sheet, House, Governor, so forth. And will you continue to present that to us with your most recent estimates? Because hasn't the House adjusted, or will they adjust again, or is that history now?
If they do adjust again, we will update this slide that I'm showing on the screen now so that we include the latest governor, House, and then our estimates. If they do update it, we will include that update here. And then obviously when we come back next month, we will have the interest and dividends and business taxes fully filled out for you as well.
And one further question, Lindsay, how many are asking for extensions at this point in time?
That's a good question. Anecdotally, I would say we are receiving more extensions this year than we have in the past, both for business and IND, but we will have that data for the full month of April when we come back to you in May, and we'll be able to give you those specific numbers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Further questions, Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Lindsay. I have a question on those that have filed already. Are you able to tell what percentage people are paying the PPP and what that amount might be, or when will you have that information?
So presumably PPP is included in what they have filed or paid to date, since it is current law. That amount should be reported on their return on what we call Schedule 4, but we would need their full return to have been included. So if they're filing on extension, we won't have that return until the fall. But we can do a preliminary look for when we're back in front of you in May to see what data we are able to get off of the returns that have been filed to date.
Thank you.
Further questions? Great. Lindsay, are you seeing any trends with respect to business taxes? Obviously, they're exceeding our plan, but based on what you've seen, if that's possible to this point in April, are you seeing anything that you could reasonably give us any kind of look ahead?
I would say we've started to look at the data that we've been receiving. As is often the case, a lot of the revenue is driven by a few number of taxpayers. So we are seeing some large payments from some large multinational corporations, but that is generally to be anticipated. Although, as we talked about months ago when we started talking about revenue estimates, it might not be the same taxpayers that we're used to seeing the large payments from. Because again, COVID has had a little bit of a disparate impact on each taxpayer. So there are some taxpayers who in 2018, 2019 may have been performing very well. They may have been very hard hit by COVID, but you may have another taxpayer who COVID has very much benefited their business. And so we're seeing increased payments from them. So again, the trend of large payments from a few number of businesses, that point of the triangle that we're used to talking about, that still exists. It just might not be the same businesses making up that portion of the triangle.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Lindsay. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
All right. At this point, I'd like to consider going into executive session, at least on 626.
So moved.
That's all right. Moved into executive. Any second?
Second.
Second by Hennessy. Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. We're in executive session, and I'd entertain a motion on 626 so we can discuss it. I'll move on to pass.
Second.
All right, seconded by Daniels. For purposes of discussion, I tracked this pretty closely with Representative Majors, Representative Abrami, and they had the conversation with Senator French. He's amenable to allowing 626 to proceed. The House will keep 112 on their either on the table. Really, no changes in this bill, and so the motion and second to ought to pass. And without, is there any further discussion?
So for
yes, go ahead, please.
So for clarification, there was a recommendation that we use House Bill, this one.
626.
As opposed to Senate Bill 112. The three grammatical differences between them, do we, it was pointed out what they were, but it was also mentioned that that they would prefer to use House Bill 626, and I'm just trying to determine whether, which one we're planning on using, or if those grammatical differences make a difference in some case, because on one, Representative Abrami said, they recommend using the Senate bill on this one, but then the House bill on another. So I didn't know if an amendment was necessary to bring things in alignment with the recommendations.
Yep. Any further discussion? I don't see any need for an amendment.
Yeah, he said we could correct that and enroll bills.
Right.
It would be simple because there's no really dramatic change. I just a point of interest. They're talking about using 1,000 terminals. And if you look at these numbers, $500 million in handle, I just look at it too. The total game operators revenue is 49 million. The charities get 5 million. Are those numbers correct?
I have no basis of saying they're not correct, so I'd have to make an assumption that they are.
Okay. It is what it is.
Well, I think that plays well to the study that we're putting.
Yes, I hope so.
Oh no, and I'm fully supporting of that, Lou, as you know.
Yep.
Any further discussion? I'm comfortable, Gary, just to your question, I'm comfortable with the bills moving forward as has been suggested by the House and also accepted by Senator French with no concern whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and without further discussion, we'll go ahead and take the vote. Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Gaida votes yes. I can take it out, or if anyone else would like to. I'll go ahead and take this one out. And we can move to consent.
Move consent.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Hennessy, Daniels. Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
And Senator Gaida votes yes. So we'll go on to consent with it. I think 15 has some discussion, and I've asked for some information, some clarifications for my own purposes as well. I'm happy to share that with the committee. So at this point, I think our business for the day is done. As far as we can come out of executive.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
And Senator Gaida votes yes. We're now out of executive session. Senate Finance is meeting in the Senate chamber now, 3 days a week. And I would like to poll the committee just to see what your thoughts are about Ways and Means doing the same thing or continuing to meet as we are. I'd just like to get a sense of where you'd like to go, because I've shared with Josh that we might be wanting to move in that direction. So obviously this week was too soon. I talked to him late last week, but if we're interested, they can arrange that. Is there any interest or lack thereof? Rather stay the way we are or move down to Concord? Gary?
I'm fine either way. I mean, I've got to be up here for finance anyway, so whether come early in the morning or later, go either way.
Okay. Aaron?
I have to be here anyways in time, because the time between the two meetings doesn't allow me to commute. So I would prefer to meet in person always. And since I'm going to be here, that would be my vote.
Cindy?
Well, I would probably prefer to meet the way we are, but if as long as the legislature continues to have its mask policy in place, I'm willing to come in if members adhere to that.
Lou?
Yeah, I think Cindy makes an excellent point. We've had a situation where a member won't wear the mask, and that's very disconcerting. If everybody wears their mask, I'm amenable to coming in in the morning. But I think we have to wear the mask. The facility's good. I mean, the spacing should be very easy with only 5 of us. That should be no problem at all. But I would follow Cindy's motion. I would ask that people wear their masks. I think that's the important ingredient as we go forward.
And I would wonder how the staff feels too, if
what's the reaction
the
of the
committee
staff?
staff is comfortable coming in.
Sonia?
I will do what I am told.
That's not what we asked.
Right.
But what, Sonia, we know that you're compromised, and you don't want to put yourself in any danger, and I certainly appreciate that, and you've done very well with this this situation as it is. I wouldn't want any member of the staff to feel uncomfortable. You do a great job as it is. You really service us well, and we should be really adherent to the desires of the staff. Now that's you and Ava for this committee. So I would appreciate be real with us.
I appreciate that. Maybe I could get back to you offline.
Okay. Great.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if you were done or not. I just wanted to mention that when Chris Shea would like to add one other thing before you adjourn.
Oh, bring him in, please.
Okay.
Unmute, Chris.
Yep, got it. I was trying to find myself on the screen. Senator D'Alessandro, you had asked Commissioner Stepp about, the House and updating Ways and Means on anything that they might do.
Yes.
I would also be doing that for the committee.
Oh, great.
I know that Ways and Means tentatively has some, House Ways and Means tentatively has some revenue updating meetings scheduled for the end of April. I think the 28th and 29th. And I would plan to participate with that, or at least have someone from our staff involved with that.
That's great, Chris.
So we would bring that information over to you.
Great.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before is April is the month that the tobacco settlement money is collected.
Right.
And in the plan was for $39.2 million. The governor and the House estimated 38.4 based on what the Attorney General's office had indicated we might be getting. The true value has increased from those numbers. As of today, there's 36.6 million in the door, and it can be as high as 47 million. There's another deposit that's going to occur on the 22nd. And the Department of Justice thinks it's going to be closer to a total of 47 million.
Wow.
So I just wanted you to know that in case I don't speak with you guys before that comes in, but I'll shoot an email once I know the total amount. But again, just something, another example of how the revenues can change as you get through the month of April. And you guys have some advantage over the House Ways and Means with, the estimates. So that's all I had. I just wanted to make sure the committee knew that I would keep you apprised to any changes or thoughts that the House had on its revenue estimates, and then try to keep you apprised to anything that I know of that's happening up to date on the current revenue.
We never underestimate the wisdom of Chris Shea.
Oh, but challenge it at times, please.
Hey, Chris, speaking of challenges, in the House budget that was passed, there was fairly significant revenue decreases. How are they being handled in this process?
So you would make the way it's being handled is through the surplus statement as an adjustment. Okay. So that when I showed you the document earlier, the first page is your current law revenue estimate. So that's what Lindsay and Melissa were talking to you about. They weren't including any potential changes. Okay. And I believe the agencies, as they come through, will give you what they believe current law estimates are going to be. And then as you debate and decide on changes that you might like to see happen to some of these statutes that might impact revenue, you'd come up with an estimated impact associated with that. So for instance, the House has the single sales factor delay, and I'll use that one because it's easy. And they have if they delay it, you're going to gain $20 million potentially in your business taxes. The House went through many discussions with DRA and itself and looked at the numbers associated over the last 5 years. I think it was 15, 16, 17, and 18 as the tax years that DRA could provide. And they saw some of the volatility in what happens with that change. And they just did an average and they came up with $20 million impact. This committee, Senate Ways and Means, may look at the same information. And if you were to keep this, you might say, you know what, it's going to be less of an impact or more of an impact. But if you were to remove this, we would say it's just a $20 million reduction to your revenue estimate. So hopefully that helps.
Certainly something to think about.
That's all I had. I don't mean to drag this out or keep you guys on the call for longer than you need to be.
Oh, we won't let you.
Thank you, Chris.
So yeah, I'm here. You can email me if you have questions. If you think, one thing I will send you if the committee would like is an Excel file that will have the House Ways and Means estimates that were used in the budget, which are the 318 estimates. And then I'll have the 3 columns emptied for the Senate so you could populate them. But I'll give it to you in Excel so that you can add and subtract and make adjustments as you feel you would like to do. And then when you get to making your final adjustments, I'll track those to make sure that they get included in the back of House Bill 1 on the unrestricted revenue estimate piece.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
You guys are welcome. And have fun at Senate Finance today.
Oh, yeah, we'll
I'm
do
sure
it.
we will. Any further questions? And Gary?
Thank you. Not for Chris, but just going back to your question about meeting in person or not. I just want to bring it up for discussion purposes, but
Sure.
We currently have spent probably tens of thousands of dollars on air exchanges in the Senate. The mask mandate has been removed. Social distancing is still in place, and as was previously mentioned, there's plenty of room for 5 or 6 of us to spread out in the Senate chamber. At what point in time, or under what scenario, would we return to something that we have done in the past? And I hesitate to call it normal because I don't know what the new normal is.
It's a good question. I'm comfortable not going with masks, but I respect others. But again, we're going to be 20 feet apart in the Senate chamber. So I think I should be left to individual discretion, but that would probably be a better question asked of Senator Morse as the president.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have that conversation with him.
We have nothing else, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and we'll call a roll. Senator D'Alessandro.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Hennessy.
Yes.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
And Senator Guida votes yes. Thank you, and I'll continue the discussion for now. I'll talk to Chuck about his thoughts, but you're right. We've got air exchangers. We've got, and a person can mask if they so choose. I'm not sure. Again, if Chuck has a policy that he wants to implement regarding that, and I have to respect, obviously, the Senate president and where he would take it. With that, I'll get back to you all, and as far as how to meet. And Sonia, I'll look for you to poll your colleagues and talk with anyone you choose and let us know. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
See you at 1, everybody.